In sunny Miami, where life buzzes with vibrant colors, lives a humble artist. Her skill is embodied in miniature masterpieces created for storefront displays. Delicate flowers bloom on walls, bright signs attract attention, and window paintings beckon passers-by. Yet behind this outward beauty lies tireless effort and a modest income. Solitude is her constant companion. Her family is a distant memory. Her parents passed away, leaving her with no siblings. She is alone in this vast world. A small room serves as her home, a refuge from the hustle and bustle. Cleanliness and simplicity are its defining features. A bed, a chair, and a table are her only possessions. A fan provides relief from the oppressive heat on sweltering days. Her diet is simple and unpretentious. Rice, bread, and soup form the basis of her meals. She doesn't frequent restaurants or indulge in new clothes. Frugality is her guiding principle. Every dollar counts. Sometimes she has to skip dinner, and some nights are washed away with tears. But each morning she finds the strength to wake up and return to work. Such is her life, work, sleep, and an endless struggle for survival. One rainy morning, she was painting the window of a small cafe. Her wet shirt clung to her body, and her hands were stiff with cold. Her work was almost finished when a man entered the establishment. His gray hair and long coat spoke of years lived. He was about 60. He moved slowly, with dignity. Settling at a table by the door, he became absorbed in watching the rain. Then his gaze fell upon her. She looked away, feeling self-conscious. Finishing her work, she began to clean her brushes. The man rose and walked towards her. A soft, kind smile lit up his face. "You look tired," he said in a calm voice. She offered a slight smile in return. "Just a long day," she murmured. He nodded, understanding. "You work very hard," he remarked, and then left. The next day, she was working on a new wall near the cafe. The same man walked past. Noticing her, he smiled. She returned the smile. He waved and went inside. Soon he emerged, holding a small cup of tea. "It's warm," he said. "Drink it, warm yourself up." She thanked him. He smiled again and left. The tea was sweet and fragrant. She felt a strange flutter. No one had ever shown her such kindness before. The following day, he came again. This time, he brought bread with the tea. "You need to eat," he said, concerned. She was flustered by such attention. "Thank you," she managed, unsure what else to say. His name was Edward. From then on, he came every day. His face was always lit by a smile. He brought tea, bread, and sometimes even flowers. Modest wildflowers from his garden. He never asked questions, never intruded on her personal space. He simply showed kindness and concern. She began to await his arrival eagerly. Her gaze would often turn towards the cafe door. When he appeared, her heart filled with warmth. She couldn't explain the feeling. He was much older than her, old enough to be her father, but his kindness and tenderness captivated her. She liked his voice, his eyes, which were devoid of coldness and full of softness. One day, he sat next to her on a bench outside the cafe and his face was serious. "Isabella," he said, "I want to talk to you." She looked at him, feeling her hands grow cold. "You live alone," he began. "You have no family. You work hard every day. Your life is full of difficulties." She lowered her eyes, unable to find words. "I want to help you," he said. She looked at him again, surprised. "Why?" she asked. He smiled slightly. "Because I care," he replied. "I see how you live." He stood up. "Please, think about what I've said," he requested and then left. That evening, she sat in her room, pondering his words. No one had ever told her they cared before. No one had looked at her with such warmth. What did he mean? The next day, as she worked, he approached and handed her a letter. He was a man of few words. "Please read this," he said, "and then think." He smiled and left. She held the letter in her hands for a long time, hesitant to open it. She was afraid. Her heart pounded wildly. What could it say? Later, sitting on her bed, she finally opened the envelope. On a small, clean sheet of paper, a text was written in neat handwriting. He wrote of his desire to help her. He offered to pay her rent, provide food and work. He assured her he expected nothing in return, but he had one request. He asked for her hand in marriage. Her hands trembled. Marriage. She couldn't sleep. Sitting by the window, she watched the rain drumming against the glass. Her heart was overflowing with thoughts. Was he serious? Was this real? She had no family, no support. Life was a daily struggle. Her work brought in a modest income, barely enough to live on. And suddenly, someone was offering her his hand and heart, promising help and support. But was it the right thing to do? She remembered his face, his kind voice, the care with which he brought her tea, his smile. He never demanded anything in return, always respectful and tactful. But was marriage about love or just a transaction? The next morning, she didn't go to work. She stayed in her room, rereading the letter over and over. Her small room had become a cage in which she paced back and forth. Her feet were numb with cold, her head throbbed with thoughts. After lunch, he came again. He stood by the cafe door, in the rain. His coat was soaked through, but his smile remained unchanged. She walked up to him, holding the letter in her hand. "I read it," she said in a quiet voice. He waited. She looked at his face, then out at the street. "I agree to marry you," she said. He froze in anticipation. Isabella's gaze flickered across his face, then shifted to the street outside the window. Finally, she uttered words that seemed to hang in the air. "I agree to be your wife." In response, he didn't move, as if time had stopped. Only a moment later did a smile appear on his face, and his eyes filled with tenderness. "Thank you, Isabella," he said softly. In that moment, there were no passionate embraces, no fervent kisses, no jubilant celebration, just two people standing in the drizzling rain, just two hearts trying to comprehend what was happening. Edward informed her that they could marry as early as the following month. A modest ceremony, without a noisy celebration, just a signature on a document, an exchange of rings, and a promise of fidelity. Later that evening, Isabella again sat on the edge of her bed, intently examining her hands. They felt both hot and icy. Questions swirled in her head, giving her no peace. Did I make the right choice? Will I feel safe with him? Will I regret my decision later? The rain outside intensified, and she listened to its soothing sound. In the quiet of the room, her whisper emerged. Time will tell. The next morning, Isabella returned to her canvas. Her hands moved habitually, but her mind was occupied with the upcoming changes. A new chapter of life was approaching, shrouded in uncertainty. Perhaps it would be happy, or perhaps not. But she had already said yes. Days dragged on slowly, like a river in a drought. Edward visited her less often, explaining it was to give her time and space. Isabella continued to work, painting storefronts and the walls of cozy cafes. She tried to fill her mind with creativity, but Edward's letters still lay in her bag, and his words echoed in her head. She pondered the upcoming wedding, his proposal. It all seemed unreal, but she had already given her consent. One morning, Edward appeared at her doorstep again, holding a piece of paper with the wedding date. "There will only be a few close friends," he said. "No party, just a modest ceremony, only if you still want it." Isabella looked at the date and quietly replied, "Yes, I'll be there." She told no one about the upcoming event, as she had no close people with whom she could share her joy. She didn't buy a wedding dress, as she had no money for it. Instead, she found an old, plain white dress in her closet. Isabella carefully hand-washed and ironed it. The dress looked delicate and clean. She tied her hair with a white ribbon, and her preparations were complete. The long-awaited day arrived. The sky was covered with gray clouds, and the air felt heavy and humid. Isabella walked alone to a small building on the outskirts of the city. It was a quiet and secluded place. Edward waited for her outside in a black suit. He looked neat and calm, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Hello," he said. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," Isabella replied. They went inside together. Only 5 people, strangers to Isabella, were present in the hall. They were probably old friends of Edward's. The priest who was to conduct the ceremony was a benevolent man. He smiled warmly at the couple. The room was silent. There was no music or photographers, only their hands, their eyes, and 2 simple wedding rings. Edward said, "I will always take care of you." Isabella replied, "I will try." They exchanged rings, and the priest declared them husband and wife. Edward looked at Isabella with tenderness in his eyes and said, "Let's go home." They walked out of the building, hearing no applause or congratulations. Isabella didn't mind. Everything seemed like a dream, slow and quiet. Edward's house was far from the noisy city streets. They took a short car ride, during which Isabella looked out the window with excitement in her heart. It was her first time going to his house, and she didn't know what to expect. The house turned out to be small but sturdy. It had old walls and large windows. Inside, it smelled of flowers and wood. Books stood on every shelf. The chairs looked soft and comfortable, and the curtains were thick and red. The air in the house was warm and cozy. "This is my home," Edward said. "Now it's your home too." Isabella looked around and remarked, "It's quiet here." "Yes," he replied, "but it's safe here." That first night, Isabella slept in a new room. The bed was large and comfortable, but she couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, feeling like a guest. She wasn't scared, but she didn't feel at peace either. Edward didn't come to her room, giving her personal space. He demanded nothing, and this made her feel better. He was respectful and kind. Nevertheless, Isabella kept asking herself, "Is this my life now?" The next morning, she woke up early and went to the kitchen. Edward was already there, brewing tea and preparing bread. The aroma of fresh baking filled the room. A small cup waited for her on the table. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," Isabella replied. They ate in silence, but it wasn't an oppressive silence. It was soft and peaceful, like quiet music. Each day was much like the last. Edward brewed tea. Isabella helped in the kitchen. He worked in the garden, and she watched him from the window, listening to his quiet humming. He seemed happy. One rainy day, Edward came into the house with a box in his hands. "These are for you," he said. "Books." Isabella opened the box and saw collections of stories with simple titles and warm covers. "Thank you," she said, and smiled slightly. Over time, they started talking more. Isabella asked him about the garden, and he told her about the flowers. She inquired about his past, and he answered quietly and reservedly. He shared that he had never been married before and had no children. He once worked in a bookstore, and now he enjoyed growing herbs and reading books. Isabella listened to his stories, simple and straightforward, without adventures or travels, but full of kindness. His voice was pleasant, and his eyes remained soft and tender. In his tales of journeys, kindness resonated, his voice captivated with pleasant tones, and his gaze retained its softness and warmth. One evening, after dinner, he offered me another cup of tea. "I am glad for your presence here," he said sincerely. Meeting his gaze, I felt something new in my chest, different from fear or a sense of duty, a warm and pleasant feeling. "Thank you," I replied with gratitude. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, and I woke up with a gentle smile on my face. In the kitchen, he was, as always, busy baking. Noticing me, he offered, "Try some." The warm bread was soft and sweet to the taste. That day, he showed me his garden, where flowers bloomed in full glory and herbs exuded freshness. "Nature teaches us patience," he wisely observed. I enjoyed spending time in his company. We sat outdoors for long periods, discussing books and simple things in life. He never touched upon my past, never tried to impose his feelings. He simply listened and smiled, showing genuine interest. This touched me deeply. I stopped seeing him as merely an old man, recognizing instead a kind and gentle-hearted person who would never hurt me and offered care without asking for anything in return. One evening, we sat on the porch, admiring the bright stars and enjoying the cool air. Holding a cup of tea, I looked at him and felt completely safe. Perhaps our communication was growing into something more than just help. Something small and slow, yet palpable, was beginning to emerge between us. The next day, I helped him in the kitchen. I cooked soup and he baked bread. We laughed when I accidentally dropped a spoon and he helped me pick it up. "You're doing well," he praised. In the evening, we had dinner together, and I felt not just like a guest, but a part of this home. Later, stepping outside, I noticed two women from the market who, after glancing at me, began to whisper. She only married him for his money. Their words struck me like a blow to the heart. Overwhelmed with shame, I hurried home. Edward, seeing my distressed face, touched my hand and said, "Words mean nothing. I know who you are." I didn't cry, but my eyes filled with tears. That night, I asked him, "Why did you help me?" He looked at the stars and replied, "Because you needed kindness." His words touched the deepest chords of my soul. No one had ever spoken to me so sincerely and empathetically. The next morning, I woke up early and made tea. "Thank you," he said, accepting the drink. This time, I smiled first, expressing my gratitude. Weeks flew by, filled with calm days. We shared stories, drank tea, and ate meals together. Working side by side, we exchanged few but sincere words. I began to notice his gaze, full not of need or dominance, but of care and warmth. New feelings were budding within me. I didn't want to run away or hide. I wanted to stay. Not knowing if it was love, I understood it was something more than just help or duty. It felt real. One morning, Edward went to town. Left alone, I drank tea and browsed the books he had given me. The house was silent, more palpable than usual. I waited for him by the window, admiring the garden and listening to the sound of the wind. I missed him. In the evening, he returned with a bouquet of small flowers. "These are for you," he said, extending them to me. My heart beat faster. "Thank you," I replied with a smile. That night, I sat by the window, touching the necklace he had given me. It was a simple and inexpensive piece, but the first gift I wore by choice, not out of a sense of obligation. Later that evening, he brewed tea and sat across from me. "You seem happier lately," he remarked. I looked at him and nodded, agreeing with his words. In my heart, there was no longer fear or pain, only peace and tranquility. I didn't feel lonely or lost. Each day grew softer and more pleasant. We worked in the garden and baked bread together. I painted a small corner in the kitchen, and he praised my work. I started smiling more often, and he noticed that my eyes shone brighter. Self-confidence grew within me. Then the season changed. The air grew cooler, the sky clearer, the flowers in the garden bloomed in full glory, and the rooms in the house filled with warmth. One evening, Edward and I sat by the fireplace. He looked at me with tenderness in his eyes and took my hand. "Are you happy, Isabella?" he asked. I looked at him for a long time, then replied, "I married for money, but now I stay because I want to." He gently touched my face and our lips met for the first time in a kiss. It wasn't a quick and passionate kiss, but a soft and warm one, devoid of selfishness or need. It was a kiss of love. That night, we sat in silence, holding hands, my heart filled with lightness and joy. Once I doubted everything, and now I feel everything, I whispered. He kissed my forehead and replied, "Me too." The days that followed passed slowly and calmly, yet everything seemed new and beautiful. We started laughing more, cooking new dishes, and taking walks outdoors. We watched birds and clouds, talking about nothing and everything. They often indulged in leisurely walks outdoors, observing the graceful flight of birds and the whimsical shapes of clouds drifting across the sky. Their conversations encompassed both deep reflections and light, non-committal topics. One day, Isabella went to town alone. Her path led to the bustling market where she bought fresh fruit and flour for her upcoming cooking. She offered radiant smiles to passers-by, and in return received friendly smiles. In that moment, she didn't feel small and timid. On the contrary, she was filled with confidence and the realization that she was valued and understood. Suddenly, her ear caught the whispers of two women standing behind her. "She's only with him for the money," an envious voice said. "It's not real." The words, like arrows, pierced her back. But this time, she didn't flee in a moment of weakness. She stopped, turned around, and looked directly into the eyes of the speakers. Without a single word, only with a gaze full of dignity, she expressed her disdain. Then, holding her head high, she slowly walked away, refusing to let them define her destiny or label her. That evening, she shared what had happened with Edward. He listened attentively to her story and said, "People often speak without knowing the truth, but we know, and that is enough." Isabella nodded in agreement, believing him and their love. Life continued its course, filled with simple joys and small events. He taught her how to make delicious jam, and she showed him how to paint elegant flowers on the wall near the table. Together they built a small bench for the garden. On warm days, they often sat on it after lunch, holding hands and opening their hearts to each other. One morning, when she brought him tea, he took her hand and gently kissed it, saying, "Thank you, Isabella. You are the light in this home." She looked at him with love and replied, "And you are too." A few days later, Edward felt unwell. Isabella lovingly cared for him, preparing nourishing soup, changing cool compresses on his forehead, and reading to him while he slept. She didn't leave his bedside. Looking at his face, she felt fear. But even stronger was the realization that she didn't want to lose him. When he felt better, he smiled weakly and whispered, "You stayed." "Of course I stayed," she replied. Then almost inaudibly, she added, "I love you." These were the first words of love she had ever spoken aloud. Tears appeared in his eyes. "I love you too," he replied. The next day, Isabella painted a new picture. It depicted their garden, blooming plants, the cozy bench, and 2 cups of tea. She gave it to Edward. He hung the painting by the front door, saying, "We'll see it every day." Seasons passed, and their love grew like a garden, not quickly or for show, but deeply and enduringly. Isabella no longer felt poor and lost. She felt loved and strong. One afternoon, they sat on the porch, holding hands and admiring the sky. Edward said, "You saved me." "No, you saved me," Isabella replied. He smiled and said, "Maybe we saved each other." And she knew it was true.